Liftoff. We have a liftoff.
Hello and welcome to TV on TV. I'm State Representative Tommy Vitolo. You're watching Brookline Interactive Group. Today is Thursday, December 4th, and we have a great show for you today. We have Kelly Hardebeck from Brookline's Advisory Committee, and she is going to answer questions about the most recent Brookline town meeting held just before Thanksgiving. And we're going to talk about some of the interesting articles and decisions that town meeting made. It's pre-recorded, and because it ran a few minutes longer than typical, there's no time for the news. And so no news is good news. We're going to transition right now to Kelly Hardebeck, member of the advisory committee, and we're going to talk about the most recent town meeting and the decisions that town meeting made. So stay tuned. And welcome back to TV on TV. As promised, today we're going to talk with Kelly Hardebeck, advisory committee member, about some of the items that were discussed and decisions were made for in town meeting, which happened just a few weeks ago. Kelly, thanks for coming on the show.
Hey, Tommy, thanks for being here and happy to be here.
And my repeat viewers know that sometimes you come on after town meeting. Sometimes Dennis Dowdy comes on after town meeting. We're glad to have you. We love to hear your clear and like down the middle explanations of what town meeting was up to. I'd like to go through 1, 2, 3, 4, 7 of the 19 articles, but several of them are pretty quick. So I think we'll get through them pretty quickly. One of those that I think is fairly quick, Warrant Article 3 was the budget amendment article. Every November, there's a budget amendment placeholder article for any tweaks necessary to make sure the budget is still in balance, spend money we didn't know we were going to have, address a problem we didn't have yet. Who knows? That included some transportation money. Can you tell us a little bit about where the money came from and what we're using it for?
Sure. Well, the town received some money from the state. Basically, they have a state assessment on transportation network companies or your ride shares. And so what we voted on this year was to put some of those funds towards a subsidized program for transportation for seniors and teens. And so this is going to really provide additional funds for the senior center's existing transportation program and help expand it into an intergenerational program that'll benefit not only seniors, but teens as well.
And it turns out that, in fact, the timing works pretty well. The transportation timing needs of seniors tends to be when the teens are at school and don't need to be transported anywhere. And then the teens need the transportation a little later in the day. So it sounds like it's a really nice fit.
It is. And whenever the two populations overlap, it also really provides nice opportunity for some intergenerational contact as well. So
Love it. Love
works
it.
out both ways.
And of course, it goes without saying the senior center and the teen center were in favor of this, that they're involved.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And town meeting voted for it overwhelmingly as well.
Awesome. Awesome. Warrant Article 4, amend the general bylaws to update and correct inconsistencies. A warrant article filed by the town clerk. What's that all about?
Oh, yes. Well, the town clerk has been working on this pretty amazing project for several years to take our general bylaws and bring them into e-code format, very much like our zoning bylaws. But while the general code consultants were doing the work, really what they uncovered were so many different inconsistencies in our general bylaws. I mean, these have been written over many, many years, and different style guides had been used. In fact, I think there were 3 or 4 different spellings of the word bylaw, with or without hyphens, both parts capitalized, no capitalizations. And so really this was all about correcting all those inconsistencies. And I know in the past, we've also had warrant articles to create basically to correct some inconsistencies in language, making sure that everything was not biased in terms of language towards one gender to another. And so they also went through with an eye towards that and corrected some of that, as well as renumbering and aligning things wherever possible. So this was a great housekeeping article that will serve us well in the future. And I know at town meeting, the town clerk said he's also looking forward to putting out a style guide to help petitioners stay in line. So there'll be fewer of these inconsistencies in the future.
Help the petitioners, and then I suspect help the advisory committee Scrivener's error fix the petitioners
Yes.
who won't always be as keen to use that guide. Another thing, I don't think it was this warrant article, it was a prior warrant article, but in the same vein, there were different ways to describe who bylaws applied to: residents, citizens, right? And so there was some kind of lack of clarity there, both for the general public, but also for who could serve on boards, committees, commissions. And I think that was another great exercise in making sure that we are meeting our modern values around who we're talking about, which is much broader than perhaps the language suggested in the bylaw. So that's that. I assume that was nail bitingly controversial.
No, again, passed overwhelmingly. So
That's correct. The first warrant article, I think that created some conversation was warrant article 7, and that was a rezoning on Clark Road. For the viewers who don't have a map in their head, Clark Road is actually very long. It's in 2 parts, and this is the part of Clark Road that's immediately near Route 9 and the Maimonides School, as opposed to the part of Clark Road that goes all the way over to like Dean or something, right? This is
right.
that little loop near Route 9 and the reservoir. And in fact, the rezoning involved a building that was formerly Maimonides School. Can you walk us through what the developer wanted to do, what the town agreed to, and maybe even what the town asked for, or any modifications that came along the way that made the outcome even better?
Sure. So yeah, so this is an overlay zoning district, which is different from just modifying zoning. So in an overlay district, the underlying zoning is still preserved, but there are additional benefits that are provided via overlay. And this was really necessary because the lot on Clark Road that you talked about that has the Maimonides School building on it, that building was built under the Dover Amendment. And so the underlying zoning is a T6 or a 2 and 3 family zone. And that school building is way too big, really, to be a 2 or a 3 family house. And so really what the developer wanted to do here was reuse the building, what he was calling adaptive reuse. So not a tear down, not a demolition, wanted to take the building and create 35 rental apartments out of the building. And so basically the warrant article in the overlay district specified very specifically what was allowed within the building in terms of units, unit sizes, basically any changes to the exterior of the building that were allowable, as well as really worked with the developer to outline and define usable open space, landscaped open space, and also the number of parking spaces, which was an interesting discussion because the building is located fairly close to transit, to the T, and also a bus line that picks up right on Route 9. And so what the advisory committee and the developer agreed to was a maximum of 35 spaces, which is 1 space per unit. But the garage itself only holds 27. So one of the things that we really wanted to make sure was we were preserving as much open space as possible. Didn't want him to pave over any existing green space. And so we specified a maximum number of spaces that could be outside. I will also say that there's a small addition in the building. So in order to get to 35 units, the developer wanted to put on small rooftop addition to make sure that there were some nice 2-bedroom duplex style units that would have a deck on that second floor. And so basically that addition is going to be stepped back from the edge. So the additional height and massing of the building is not as noticeable to the neighbors or in the neighborhood as well. And so the developer really worked with both the advisory committee, subcommittee, and the AC quite collaboratively to enshrine all of these new numbers and restrictions, regulations in the warrant article to be brought before town meeting. Originally, I will also say, originally as proposed, there's a second lot on Philbrook Road. So historically, the two parcels, both the Maimonides building and really what is an athletic field that fronts on Philbrook Road, have always been owned by the same owner. And so both lots are included in the overlay zoning. But originally, the developer had proposed upzoning that second parcel in order to put some more multifamily housing on there. But they were not as far along in their design and their proposal. So we agreed to take the upzoning out, but to leave the parcel in there. So hopefully they'll come back in the springtime meeting with a tighter plan so we can actually get some more multifamily housing out of that lot.
Now, were there any currently existing features that the neighborhood wanted to preserve, or features that the neighborhood wanted that don't exist now, that the immediate neighbors were able to advocate for, to help everybody get as much as possible out of this project?
Sure. So very, very much so. So the neighborhood spoke up about two specific things. One is there is a pedestrian path from Clark Road to Philbrook. We heard how Route 9 is not, the sidewalk along Route 9 is not always well shoveled, nor is it well lit. And so the neighbors had asked that this pedestrian pathway that exists between the two streets be preserved and also be maintained. And so the developer agreed to preserve that path, to maintain it, make sure it's free of snow and ice, but also to install some lights on it. So it'll be a nice, safe walkway between the two. And the second thing the neighbors had asked for was there's currently a small playground area on the school that's used by younger kids in the neighborhood. And they had asked if that could be preserved as well. And so the developer agreed that that could be used basically free of charge from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. by everybody in the neighborhood. And so again, these are two great public benefits that the developer agreed to, which really will enhance the neighborhood.
So, I think when I first saw this Warren article, I circled it as this could really be a pain point for the town, where different people had very different visions about what's appropriate for the space. What, listen, the reality is the shape and size of the unit has a big influence on what kind of family lives there, right? You don't see a lot of
Right.
6-kid families living in 1-bedroom units. You don't see a lot of single people living in 6-bedroom units, right? To take an extreme example. And so I had sort of thought there might be 3 or 4 different camps of vision, kind of duking it out, but it doesn't sound like that's how it went down.
No, not at all. I mean, the developer came to us with a very clear proposal for 1 and 2 bedroom units, moderately sized, to be honest with you. The smallest are 700 square feet, biggest are 1250. So not massive units. Most of them are 1 bedroom. A lot of them have an additional study or den in the 1 bedroom units. And so again, they came with a proposal that they were hoping the size of the units would help keep the rental prices down and help fulfill some of that sort of middle housing that we're missing. I don't want to call it workforce housing, but it really is that sort of middle non-luxury housing that we're missing a
Workforce
lot
or
of in
even
Brookline.
starter home housing, right? I
Yep.
could imagine a
Yep.
young couple moving in and saying, like our when we have a baby, the first couple of years could be in the den. It's probably not where we want to live forever, but maybe for, 5 or more years until we get to the next part of our life.
Yeah. No, these are great. And the other thing I forgot to mention is because of our inclusionary zoning, there are also going to be 5 affordable units. So we are bringing 5 more affordable units, which is great.
And to be clear for the viewers, when we say affordable units, what we mean is subsidized units where the person who lives there has a maximum income threshold and they pay 30% of their actual income for that unit. That's sort of how it works. The other units, I think, will be lower priced than many in Brookline, but whether or not you or I could actually afford to live there is a different calculation. So, and it I don't want to say it sailed through, but it moved through town meeting pretty efficiently.
It did actually. You could say it sailed through. I mean, 240 people voted for it, so it went through with an overwhelming vote, quite frankly.
Awesome. Warrant Article 8 was, I think, our angels on the head of a pin warrant article of the session. We tend to find one where there are a lot of intellectual effort placed on an article that probably doesn't have a dramatic impact on most people's lives, and that's okay. We're not paying by the hour. Warrant Article 8 was a citizens petition warrant article about nuisance lighting, right? The artificial lights ultimately within residential neighborhoods. It's like, oh man, that's so bright and it's shining right on my house kind of stuff. How'd it go?
Article 8 was a journey from the subcommittee. So I serve in the land use subcommittee within AC. We heard this article numerous times. We also heard it numerous times at advisory. And I do think, everybody understands glare and nuisance lighting. Nobody's in favor, and I think just about everybody's experienced it at some point. But to your point, it's really hard to get the definitions right and make sure that if we're going to regulate it, that we tighten it up appropriately so that we're defining it, and we're also defining the enforcement as well. And so we heard from the building commissioner, because right now, under our zoning bylaw, the building commissioner has some leeway in negotiating these nuisance lighting sort of cases or complaints. And he's been very successful. He was telling us he's been very successful in getting people to change light bulbs, to change even light fixtures so they're shielded, to make sure that it doesn't, the bright lights aren't impacting neighbors, that they're actually lighting up the thing that they're supposed to. And that light is not trespassing or too bright so that it's intrusive. We had, I think at one point, 3 different versions of warrant Article 8 in front of us in order to reconcile. And so because this is one of those things that will require some professionals to take a look at, and also definitely some legal review by town council and others, this was referred to a moderators committee with the hope that it will come back soon. Because during all of our hearings, quite honestly, we heard from a lot of residents for whom this is a real problem for them, that there are houses in their neighborhoods that have lights on that shine in, to their bedrooms, to their living rooms, and just make enjoyment of their space kind of impossible at certain times of day.
So we're going to move on. We've got about 8 or 9 minutes left, and I want to get through 3 more warrant articles. The next one was warrant Article 9. It was the Renter's Handbook. I think, I hope you'll explain the journey of that one, which in a sense is almost more interesting than the actual outcome. Walk us through this citizens petition warrant article, maybe even describe what it had initially envisioned, and then the process that resulted in the outcome, and sort of how town meeting took on that outcome.
Sure. So as you mentioned, warrant Article 9 was a citizen petition to create a renter's handbook. Initially, it was fairly prescriptive about creating a handbook to be delivered to anyone, basically any tenant in Brookline, who is basically at risk of eviction. And the idea was that there are Brookline-specific resources that the petitioners wanted to make sure tenants knew were available to them as they were going through this journey. Initially, the book was going to be printed, translated into many different languages, because it would be considered an essential document. And the article mandated its delivery by agents of the town. And so during the journey, the warrant article journey, we discovered, there were certainly financial implications in terms of the creation, maintenance, and printing of this document, as well as the translation. But I think most interestingly, what happened was town constables, who are agents of the town, who often deliver the notice to quit, hadn't realized that this warrant article had been filed, because it does impact them. And so at the select board hearing on this particular article, The constables really shared some of their concerns about being bound by this specific bylaw and what that would mean for them. So they worked with select board and with some advisory committee members, and certainly the petitioner, in order to modify warrant article 9 so that it was something that they felt comfortable with. So what ended up happening was both the document itself was shortened and basically made a bit more efficient. It's going to end up being resources for both landlords and tenants. Again, during our discussions, one of the things we discovered is a lot of time landlords don't know what their rights are as well as tenants. And so it's important to be able to provide the information to both sides of the relationship so folks can understand what their rights and next steps and actions can be. But also one of the things that, one of the compromises that were made was that constables will deliver this on a voluntary basis. Not everybody that gets served within Brookline gets served by a Brookline constable. And so the petitioners are looking for ways to expand this, but at least now Brookline constables will voluntarily deliver it with their notice to quit.
So it sounds like this is a warrant article where the process, which for those who are uninitiated, it can look burdensome or onerous, resulted in an outcome where town meeting got something that they easily passed.
They absolutely did. I mean, really, the initial warrant article was quite ambitious and large, and really the process really helped shape and tailor it down to something that everybody really approved of, and will ultimately be a really great benefit for both landlords and renters in the town, hopefully.
And I think maybe kudos is earned by the advisory committee and subcommittee, the select board, and the petitioners for all being willing to roll up their sleeves, work through additional ideas, work through places that seem like a good idea until this other pesky fact sort of was uncovered. Oh, that doesn't work like we thought it would. You know, the flexibility, the process and the flexibility resulted in something that ends up being really workable instead of something that at the very least would be difficult to do and contentious.
Yep, no, very much so, very much so. I think that is a great example of the process and everybody really collaborating well to bring us a much better result, a much better warrant article, and as I said, outcome.
That's great. That brings us to warrant article 18, a warrant article that is near and dear to the good folks here at Brookline Interactive Group. As you know, Kelly, and as I think many of the viewers know, our modern 21st century town government includes really relying on Brookline Interactive Group for bringing people at home right into all of these board, committee, and commission meetings and hearings so they can participate or at the very least follow along in real time or later if they want to catch it the next day, a week later, or 5 years later to better understand what the heck they were talking about way back when and how it affects us today. And so Heather Hamilton, who is an employee at Brookline Interactive, and a resident of town, brought a warrant article saying, hey, give us those links so we can post them. How'd that go?
This warrant article 18 was a really interesting, another really interesting warrant article. Because one of the things that we all know is since COVID, we have most of our board and commission meetings are online. They're, basically all Zoom meetings, and they're all recorded. And so Heather knew that those recordings existed, but various boards and commissions were not making those links always available in a timely manner or a consistent manner. And so the article went through several different revisions in order to ensure that the available recordings for all boards and commission meetings would get posted consistently. So in the same place within 10 days of the meeting. And so this is great because it allows basically any member of the public to come and to view those meetings if they couldn't attend. I know one of the things I like to do is I like to watch the select board meeting. sometimes at 1.5 or twice speed in order to get through them. But it's really valuable to be able to watch any board and commission meeting for anything you're interested in. And this will improve both government transparency and just accessibility of those resources. So
Any
as it went through the
controversy by the
process,
time it got to the floor? Any controversy by the time it got to
there
the
was
floor?
no controversy by the time I got to the floor. Initially, I believe the time period for posting was relatively short, and so I know that the subcommittee and others begged for 10 days as a reasonable amount of time in order to post them, to get them posted. And so the select board is going to create or expand their process document, their policy doc for how these get posted, so that, again, chairs of every board and commission will get the document to understand what the proper way to post are, and that these should be posted within 10 days of the meeting.
And of course, they can do it sooner. And I would just sort of remind,
Absolutely.
not every board, committee, or commission, including yours, the advisory committee, sits under the select board.
Correct.
So the select board
Correct.
policies and procedures for some boards, committees, commissions may actually be a friendly guide.
That is exactly it. It will be a friendly guide. And the appointing authorities have agreed that they will use this guide and share this guide as well.
Last item, and we're going to be quick. Warrant Article 19 was a resolution urging the use of the 25th Amendment to remove Donald Trump from office. What do we decide?
So in the end, this one, of course, was a little bit controversial. And there were several motions offered under this. But eventually we decided to approve this warrant article. What was interesting about the article was that we had a counted vote, not a recorded vote. So unfortunately, because of where we are with this administration, there were some in town meeting who were concerned about potential negative effects from voting for this article. And so the moderator had moved to have a counted, not a recorded vote. We did initially take up a vote to table. There was a movement and a motion made by some town meeting members who wanted to table it the same way we did the resolutions on Israel and Gaza twice before. But that motion failed. And so those remaining, basically, some people did leave town meeting because they did not choose to vote or did not feel it was appropriate for a town meeting to weigh in on this. But the remaining folks within town meeting voted to approve it.
And because it was a vote that was taken in public by a show of hands, but not a recorded vote, some people may know how other people voted, but there's no evidence of it. And in an era of increased government transparency, this town meeting decided on this particular issue to go a different direction.
Indeed, they did. Indeed, they did. And I think it's, many folks that spoke about fear of losing their jobs, spoke about fear of losing perhaps grants from the federal government or potential harms that could come to the town. And so there was a feeling that taking a counted vote would help protect some of those people and eliminate some of the risk for them.
Interesting. Well, we are out of time. Town meeting went 2 nights. We went 26 minutes.
There we go.
Everybody's efficient. Thank you, Kelly, for all of your work on advisory committee. And thank you for taking the time with me and my viewers to walk us through what was a narrower and more focused town meeting than many, an example of government efficiency, but also remember, still an example that in our town of Brookline, folks can come in and petition their government with a pretty low bar and have their item thought about. No guarantee they get what they want, but at least there's a robust process to consider all of these ideas. And hats off to everyone involved for doing exactly that. So thank you again for being on the show, folks. This is another episode of TV on TV with me, Representative Tommy Vitolo, right here on Brookline Interactive Group. And we will see you again soon. Thanks for watching.
That's one small step